Ladies and gentlemen, this is my violent video game effects on esports and non-esports players presentation. In this presentation, I will be taking into account emotional effects suffered between two groups. So let's start with what is a violent video game? What defines a violent video game? A violent video game is a game containing alcohol, blood, or sexual content, or violence itself. And examples include Call of Duty, Fortnite, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Additionally, researchers have studied this topic since the early 2000s. Since they have been studying violent video games for a while, let's investigate two sources that weigh into both sides of an argument. Firstly, we have Yamea J. Hallbrook's When and How Video Games Can Be Good article, arguing that video games are beneficial is the goal of the scholarly source. However, the positivity absorbed depends on motivation, social interaction, and the presence of violence within video games themselves. The Effects of Violent Video Game Habits on Adolescent Hostility by Douglas A. Gentile is a scholarly source arguing that correlations between violent video game exposure and forms of hostility exist. Path analysis testing at a 600-student sample size was used. There were two goals to this source. The first goal was documenting video game habits and the amount of use received by adolescents, and the second goal was to apply variables such as physical fights and teacher interactions to find exposure associations. Taking 50 sources, including these two into account, I have concluded that they have allowed me to identify a two-way research gap and help me craft an argument. One is location, since none are from Wisconsin, and two is esports itself. With that in mind, let's look at my research question. How can emotional effects from a violent video game be examined between esports and non-esports players in Wisconsin? Since most scholarly sources I have found designed experiments identifying emotional effects like arousal, I wanted to include that within the question. Esports is a focal point because little to no research has been done in the field. A couple of key terms that need to be clarified are esports and scholastic esports. Esports are multiplayer video games played competitively at the high school, collegiate, and professional level. Scholastic esports is an area for students to learn valuable social, emotional, technical, and problem-solving skills. Students engage in games requiring strong team communication and strategy. Scholastic esports is quite prominent in Wisconsin. Around the state, there are various leagues offering extensive opportunities. Opportunities include broadcasting, graphic designing, producing, and playing. Based on scholarly work and the inclusion of esports, I have created a very cool AP research experiment that has never been done before. The experiment is recruiting esports and non-esports players from a racing high school to compete in a Fortnite Battle Royale. One will be for esports players, the other will be for non-esports players. To start with breaking down the experiment's intent, the argument is that esports and non-esports players will have contrasting emotions. I say this because people who are taught to keep their composure while gaming by a coach will react less violently than someone who does not have this luxury. Since the argument is established, the goal is to analyze emotions between groups to see if there will be any contrasting emotions. After briefly describing the experiment, let's look at the research method chosen. A survey/questionnaire method was chosen because I wanted to give participants a voice to depict how they feel before and after they play in a Fortnite match. Different types of questions were asked across two separate surveys. First survey is filled out before the match. 4 categories that will be entailed with the questions are demographic information, questions related to video games, mental emotional health, and before match evaluation. The before match evaluation is an evaluation allowing participants to choose between 5 emotions, which are excited, happy, confident, irritated, and nervous. The second survey only contains the after-match evaluation, which is identical to the before. Moving on to the experimental design and data collection plan. The design it will be located at a gaming lounge in downtown Racine. Materials, 30 high school students, 15 per group, so 15 for esports, 15 for non-esports. 10 2 paper pencil questionnaires, personalized computers, and Fortnite itself and its creative mode, which is a mode that allows you to customize how you want to play Fortnite itself. Data collection will be receiving responses from each group. Carefully cycling through the packets, creating a Google spreadsheet with separate tabs for esports and non-esports players. in order to create charts to come up with data. Now that the experimental design and data collection plan has been discussed, let's look at the experimental process. 15 players are assigned to each group. Participants are asked to fill out 2 questionnaires upon arrival. After the before-match questionnaire is complete, participants will load up Fortnite and join the lobby. Once everyone has joined the in-game lobby, I would signal the matches start, and once everybody is ready, the match begins. Participants are asked to fill out the after-match questionnaire once the Fortnite match concludes. Once that is done, the experiment is over. Before I go into the results of this experiment, I want to express my initial hypothesis. If esports players and non-esports players participate in violent video game play, then both groups will experience different emotional effects. Once again, I want to reiterate this point. Participants who are not in esports and do not know how to keep their composure may react more violently than someone who is. That is where my hypothesis comes from. And now, here are the results for the first ever esports and non-esports player experiment in Wisconsin. As exciting as it sounds, though, it keeps that charm, but not without complications. Starting out with the general observation, complications with obtaining 15 participants per group due to a lack of availability or interest. Sample sizes had to be cut. Esports had 9 players, non-esports 8. The initial design perished due to the small sample size, and organization was a slow and steady process because there was issues with scheduling, when the experiments were going to be done, and the content that was going to be in the questionnaires. Moving on to observational data for esports players. Participants were startled by questionnaires. The experiment was completed via an SRS sample size of 9. Time constraints with rides ignited a bit of impatience. Issues with inviting players to the same lobby came up. Mood shifted upward once tech issues were resolved, as players were eliminating reactions such as no and oh were present. Fallen players cheered for the winner, which was the only female there. And finally, observational data for non-esports players. Players were excited to be in the experiment. Reactions to player eliminations were present. The crowd cheered for the winner, much like the esports players. The experiment was planned out better due to more thought and time being into it, and one participant remained confident after a self-elimination and did not let that define her. Moving on to the bread of this experiment. Participant emotions before game time. Esports and non-esports players were generally confident and happy. Beginning with esports players, 27.3% said that they were excited, 18.2% reported being happy, 36.4% were confident, 9.1% said irritated, and 9.1% said nervous. Moving to non-esports players, 50% were excited, 25% were happy, 12.5% said confident, 12.5% were nervous, and 0% were irritated. Even though there is a distinct drop-off in percentage between confidence, both groups trended in the happy direction emotionally before the game. Moving on to the butter, we have participant emotions after game time. Both groups were generally happy as well. Esports players, 44% recorded to be happy, 22.2% selected excited, 22.2% said they were irritated, 11.1% were confident, 0% said nervous. Non-esports players, 50% felt happy, 25% were excited, 12.5% reported to be confident, and 12.5% said irritated. Finally, 0% reported nervous. With similar statistics from both groups, there is evidence suggesting whether you are in esports or not, people are generally excited to compete in a video game. Granted, this could have changed if there was no sense of being shorthanded. Now that the results have been revealed, let's look at some limitations and implications. Starting with limitations, the restriction of game choice due to district policies was in effect, and the low availability or interest of participants for each group that prevented this study from reaching its full potential. Moving on to implications, it opens the door for future studies, as higher player counts could yield better results, and the study could be taken in multiple directions, such as measuring heart rates, for example. And the second implication would build upon the previous research, as it proves that violent video game exposure does cause emotional differences in adolescents, even though the data supports that they were pretty much the same. After identifying limitations and implications, it is time to conclude. In concluding this project, the intended goal was met, while the hypothesis was rejected. Starting from the topic of violent video games and fitting it around esports is an incredible accomplishment. A gap was identified based on scholarly sources. From there, a unique experiment was conducted to answer the question of how emotional effects from a violent video game can be examined between esports and non-esports players.
remediate.
All right, questions?
First question. After you chose your research question, which information guided your choice of a research method?
So the information that guided me to a choice of a research method was the argument saying that there was positive video game effects and negative video game effects, and there were studies built around that. So the sample sizes, having students play a certain video game, that's pretty much where I got the notion of where my research method came from.
What might be the real-world implications or consequences related to your findings?
So the real-world implications is that many people are going to be replicating this study, hopefully, around the state of Wisconsin and incorporating esports as a whole. So the main purpose of this study was to get esports in the light so that people can start using esports for some of these violent video game experiments.
If you could revisit the research process, what would you do differently? Would you choose a different area of inquiry, and if so, why? If you would choose the same research question, what different methods or approaches would you use?
I would stick with the same research question. The methods I would choose is pretty much the same as well, just better planning. And yeah, better planning would work because I would have more players interested in running the study, as I only had 9 for esports players, 8 for non-esports. So definitely working things out, putting more thought. That's, yeah.
Excellent.